In today's adventure, we are back in the mining factory, working on the Oompa Loompa mining rig. In this series, we have been doing some troubleshooting to figure out exactly why this mining rig went down. We found out that it was a burnt connection, and I believe that this connection burnt out during a power outage. I believe there was probably a power surge during the process of the power going out, and due to this poor connection, the cable burnt. So what we did was we created our own custom adapter. We tested and verified that the adapter works. Along the way, we thought that the CPU was burnt. Luckily, that was not the case. It turned out to be a poor connection once we did some more troubleshooting. After we tested the cable and verified it worked, we then updated the BIOS and changed some of the settings and configurations within the BIOS, so that way this can be set up to be a miner. Had to enable 4G decoding, turn on the UEFI legacy post, all that good stuff. Most of the settings and configurations that I use, I have found from trial and error and researching some Reddit forums on what people have with their configurations with similar motherboards. I was able to find maybe a couple posts about my motherboards, but they weren't really pertaining to mining. They were pertaining to other purposes. But anyway, if you're interested in some of the other settings as far as the BIOS, go check out some of those other videos and how we've gotten up to this point. But now that we've gotten everything working, updated, we're going to put these GPUs back in and see if we can get it back online and mining. So something I want to point out while I'm putting these in, when I designed this and built this server case, I didn't properly account for the space needed for when you actually mount the GPU and the downward pressure. So what you'll notice is some 3D printed blocks or spacers that I printed to give a little support from underneath on the riser. I've actually, in the newer server cases that I've done, redone this design. I still mounted it on the lower side where the bottom bracket is mounted, but I adjusted the clearance, if you will, for the bracket, and actually created a bracket to put the riser in. So then I drop the GPU in the riser, and if I need to take the GPU out, I just unlock it from the riser and pop the GPU out. It's a little bit trickier than what I have here, but I think a little bit more stable. All right, so the other thing that I want to point out is I do use splitters. I don't have every single PCIe ran on its own line. It would be absolutely impossible with this breakout board to run an individual PCIe to every place that would require a PCIe. When using splitters, a common practice is do not split a line more than once. All right, so if you've got a splitter on a line, do not put another splitter on that line. Do not split a splitter, if that makes sense. If I have a riser and a breakout board, a riser and a GPU, just in this instance here, where the GPU needs 2, and that accounts for both of the ones from the splitter, I will run a separate line to the breakout board. Okay, so I'm not splitting, and if you have multiple GPUs where you're in the same scenario where you, instead of running one line, you could one line to each breakout or to each riser, you could run a splitter and power 2 GPUs or 2 GPU risers. But like I said, don't split a line more than once. As long as you really follow that rule, for the most part, it'll keep you out of a lot of trouble. Don't split a line more than once, and that'll keep you out of most issues. Now, when I'm putting these in, you probably noticed I already attached the USB, the riser board, as well as the PCIe power cables to the riser as well as to the GPU, especially if it's in a situation where, like this, it's a splitter, and then I can just run one power line to that splitter. And while we're here, one other thing that I will point out, I have this video sped up really fast, right? And what you'll notice me spending a lot of time doing is I'm constantly rerouting wires and making sure that the inside of this case the wiring is somewhat clean, right? Like if I ever have to service or maintenance this rig, I say if I ever do, when I have to service and maintenance this rig, it's a lot easier if you have everything clean. You don't have to you spend less time fighting with a mess and more time fixing the problem, rather than spending more time fighting with a mess of cables and less time fixing the problem. So if you spend a little time now to make sure everything's clean and nice, you spend less time fighting with it later. That's kind of been my experience anyway. And because this was already a rig that I set up, right? So this was already set up, it was already programmed, it was already mining, and this went down and we had to troubleshoot it and fix the problem. So when I'm putting these GPUs back in, I'm putting them all back in the exact same place that they already were. And so that way, when it powers back up and boots back up into HiveOS, it will recognize that nothing has changed. So then I don't have to reinstall all the GPUs. So just a little trick for you. And I'm actually referring to the PCIe slots on the motherboard. You have to make sure that you keep them in the exact same order that you originally had them, or it's not going to recognize the exact same configuration, and in my experience you run into issues and have to reinstall each graphic card. So to avoid that, I put them all back in the exact same place. The way I have it is the furthest one on the left is 1, the one next to it is 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's how I have them on the motherboard. So I kept it simple, so they just follow straight down. So now that we have all of these put in, we are going to take this over and hook it up in our temporary hosting spot. Hook it up to the Ethernet and see if we can connect it to HiveOS and see if we can get this miner back online. That in. No USB. Let's get that. Alright, so thumb drive. So once we get the flash drive in, the actual booting process is really simple. All the configurations and settings and all of that good stuff has already been done within the BIOS, as far as selecting which device we're going to boot from, and then from there all of the operating system settings are configured within HiveOS. So I'm a big fan of Hive OS. It's really simple when doing remote managing of mining rigs. And if you guys have another software system like Hive OS that you would recommend, throw it down in the comments. I'd be interested to hear what some of you guys are using. But yeah, so after we get the flash drive in, I press the power button on the breakout board. That's going to send power to everything that's in the case. It does not activate power to everything, but it has power essentially on standby. And then when I flick the power switch here in the front, then that's what actually activates the power to be sent into the devices. So once this thing boots up, and it does take a few seconds for it to boot up, because what's actually going to happen is the motherboard has been directed to boot from the flash drive. The flash drive, it boots up to a main screen that if nothing is pressed within 5 seconds or 10 seconds, then it automatically activates Hive OS. Then Hive OS is synced to the flash drive. The Hive OS on the flash drive is synced to my Hive OS account. So once it actually boots and is online, it will officially show on my Hive OS operating system. So like I said, there's a few things that's going on. So it's not instant. It's not as soon as you power it on, it shows. So you do have to give it 30 seconds, to a minute typically, and then it should show in your Hive OS, and then you can actually manage, edit, and configure anything within the rig that needs to be configured. So there we go, show it in Hive OS. If you found this helpful, interesting, entertaining, like and subscribe.